The thing I want to touch on is that I feel like Ubisoft have been so safe for so long that they got so sterile and boring that both these games in particular, the thing is with Outlaws, like it's worth touching on that as the press have got hands on with it, they have noted it is literally the Ubisoft formula applied to the, like a Star Wars skin over the Ubisoft formula, and that is potentially extremely boring again. However, I was going to say that I feel like both games at least have cool, innovative ideas in regards to doing something fresh. Like within that formula on the Star Wars side, there is the idea of the factional warfare stuff, like you are making dialogue decisions on missions that apparently change which factions you align with, and then choosing to betray certain people on mission and that pitch them against each other, which made me think a little bit of the Nemesis system, or just something other than just getting through a checklist of missions or whatever. So that's cool. And then on the Assassin's Creed side, like it really seems like they've doubled down on actually making a stealth game. Like there's the seasonal stealth stuff, which is really cool. Like environments are affected by which season you're doing the mission in, which is cool. And like just little ways of infiltrating, like you can go underwater and breathe underwater and whatever. Just little innovations or little nods to a specific genre rather than just trotting the same thing out. And I wonder how much all of that is because they just needed to literally drain the swamp of all the stuff that happened across the last few years. And there was a specific executive, Sergei Haskoway, who was specifically forcing everything to be the same mold over and over and over again. And that dude's now long gone, thankfully. And I wonder if it's taken this long to just be able to let the teams go, can we just have cool gameplay ideas again?
Oh, I'm conflicted on it, right? I really am, because
I don't fully believe it's a whole renaissance thing, but it's just that it's more promising than it's been for a while.
It certainly is more promising. It certainly looks better. It certainly looks like they have a little bit more freedom. But like you said, from the previews about Outlaws, they are still playing to their strengths, and I think they are still working within a formula across the board.
Oh, yeah.
It just feels like that formula has for me, a sense of polish that has been lacking recently, and more importantly, a sense of focus on what do we want to achieve. We want half a stealth game and half a game where you get to kick people's heads in the most violent way possible way, and just like the slight tweaks to the stealth, for instance, being able to go prone, having the different seasons that you mentioned. It's just enough, I think, for it to feel a little bit more robust than it has been previously, because they might still stretch themselves too thin, but previously I felt like they tried to do so much and every mechanic seemed a little bit shallow. This time around, from the impression I get, it just seems like those mechanics are a little bit deeper, which goes a long way.
That physics-based swinging, I mean, all Ubisoft do is just look at what works and then bring it back in. Sometimes that's something they themselves did 10 years ago or whatever, but bringing Spider-Man swinging and having a physics-based swinging model for now is
Syndicate,
so cool.
you could use the grapple hook as well.
It was
a little bit different.
It was context-specific, but in this, they've said you can latch it onto any edge of a roof, but it is physics-dependent. You can pick a point and then swing through a level.
It does remind me, actually, of Uncharted 4's rope.
Yes, that's the...
was maybe a little more contextual. I don't know, maybe you have more freedom here, but that was a cool mechanic. I mean, being able to, come off a swing, use that momentum, drop down and punch a guy in the face. That might be the best mechanic ever made.
There's some caution I want to put to all this, because I felt like, similarly, when Ghost Recon Wildlands got revealed, I was like, wow, this looks like the next step in the iteration of that franchise. If you're going to look at tactical guerrilla warfare, you're going to bring in vehicles, you're going to have a 4-player co-op world, you're going to be able to take down these drug kingpins on your own terms and use vehicles. You can complete freedom in planning missions and stuff. And then when you actually got into playing both Wildlands and Breakpoint, games that look very flashy on YouTube with the HUD off and you can lie in the ground and make yourself muddy, different interesting mechanics to experiment with, but it all falls apart when you actually get to bones with the AI and the actual enemy types. And for me, that is still something that remains to be seen with both Outlaws and Shadows, is that I think it's been a trend recently with Ubisoft games, at least the ones that I'm mostly interested in, which tends to be the Tom Clancy stuff, and Ghost Recon specifically, especially Breakpoint, is that they've shown features which I'm like, that's great. I remember the trailer for Breakpoint when they had you could lie in the mud and then you'd have enemies walk past you and stuff. And then when you actually play it, it's like, oh, this is not as cinematic or as organic as you were selling it to be. So I really, fingers crossed that what we're seeing of Outlaws and Shadows isn't that really kind of pillboxed view of what Ubisoft want us to see, and that in actual practice, these mechanics line up with a compelling AI level design.
I think that's an incredible point, because that has burnt at least me personally so many times in the past on those Ghost Recon games, on something, I know it's perhaps an anomalous example now, but Watch Dogs back in the day, which looked incredible, then you got hands-on and not only did it not look as good as the trailer, trailer, but the systems that were in there were much more shallow than we were led to believe.
Oh, yeah.
And that has been a recurring thing with Ubisoft, and that is probably why I'm going to wait for reviews on both of these games to make sure what they're showing is representative.
You don't want to pay £240 for a practice session?
I don't.
I don't know who would.
It's the same thing with like Valhalla, right? Valhalla, that was the first Assassin's Creed game that I bought at launch. Same as you, Ewan, since Syndicate. Like
Syndicate bods.
Syndicate is good. I can really concur with that. But getting into Valhalla, I thought it looked like it had some of the issues that I had with Odyssey, but the things that they were talking about, changing the exploration so it wasn't just market driven and you weren't really thinking about the world, but encouraging you to explore, and a few of the details like that made me think that they were going to radically overhaul the game. And changes were made, but it was still the same formula with the same issues. So hopefully they aren't doing the same thing again, and it is a proper step up rather than just a nicer set dressing and a few more bells and whistles on the same meal. I don't know why you would put bells and whistles on a meal. But,
jangly.
You look at it somehow.
Gimmicky.
Jangly. Gimmick up a meal that we've had forever.
Those games, you have to make your own fun with them in a way. At least for the Ghost Recon side of things, like you can play it super seriously and like try and like basically delude yourself into thinking that the AI has a brain and that you're being very careful and smart with everything, which is how I played it with my friends. Because if you don't, then the game just does not work on like the most fundamental level. So I'm skeptical but excited. And I think for me, like as a Star Wars person, like I'm there day one for Outlaws anyway. Like I need to see that and experience it.
Yeah, I'm weirdly here for both of these games. Like, I think I've been waiting for the Japanese Assassin's Creed since the beginning. Like I was that fan who at the very end of the original Assassin's Creed, when they show a Torii Gate as one of the bits of graffiti on the wall that Subject 16 has put on the wall, I was like, oh my God, we're doing Japan next. And they just never did. So I've been there since then. But like I said, I'm weirdly there for it at the minute. But it is worth drilling down on things like the AI and the general animation polish and the way that it's been shown off at the minute, where like the AI stuff is usually where it falls down. And I wonder how much in regards to just doing a stealth game, do you need a certain level of dumb AI so you can get through an encounter in a mass market game? They're not going to do a hardcore stealth title. I wanted to mention the fact that Shadows has this whole impetus on physics, which is really cool, that the devs have talked about, where, you know, if you do a big arcing swing with a sword or a club or whatever, you'll hit parts of the environment and that'll all scatter as well, which is really cool. And you can obviously knock people through walls and stuff like that. But alongside that is some things to do with some of the combat animations where you can see it clipping and pulling in the next thing, maybe not as smoothly as it could. And there's also like a kill filter that they've got on some of the executions where it goes immediately to black and white, the visceral claret or whatever is bright red.
I hope you can turn that off.
I assume you could, but it's like that's a thing that I think just because we're still months out from launch or whatever, I think that needs a little bit tightening up. Like for me, that kill filter just looks like a fan hack. Like
maybe it's like YouTube censorship. Maybe they're pre-censoring it for YouTube.
Maybe.
It just looks. I mean, I think what they're going for is like a sort of painterly look of certain paintings at the time or whatever, but it still just looks a bit forced.
That'll be my biggest question mark, because similar to what Ewan was saying there, one thing that I always get annoyed with when it comes to the differences between an Ubisoft trailer or a gameplay reveal and how it actually plays is that I almost never feel like I'm actually part of a world in an Ubisoft game. And that is so frustrating because they are some of the most detailed and beautiful worlds ever created in the entire history of video games. But I always feel like the gameplay encourages you to kind of take perhaps a more arcadey approach and just, you know, blitz through areas, don't really think about them, don't really think of the impact you're having, don't treat them as places, but treat them as play spaces. And I know a lot of people might like that approach, but I'm a modern day rockstar guy where I like every step that I take along the way to feel impactful.
It should feel like the world breathes without you, yeah.
Exactly. And I get that vibe from here, and I hope it carries across the entire game. You know, for instance, it's I don't know the pronunciation. It's Yakase, right?
Yasuke.
Yasuke,
yeah.
That's sorry, yeah.
It's Yasuke and Naue.
Yasuke and Naue. Like when you saw Yasuke walking through the streets, just like that presence that he has in the world.
People bowing to him as a samurai.
Bowing as a samurai. People getting like a little bit scared. Like I felt like I was occupying, well, not me, but I felt like he was occupying
He
space
just like
in
me
that
for
world.
real.
And that helps with the pushed-in camera, but it does help with those environmental cues, like the AI, like the NPC reactions, like the combat, which, you know, when he's throwing people through walls or it's doing this environmental damage, it feels like when you walk into Valentine and you're scrapping in the mud and everyone's kind of watching. I want that vibe back from Assassin's Creed, because that's what I loved about the original games, where it felt like I was part of a society. And I was moving
It's a
through it.
greater level of thought and depth. I
Yeah.
think, like with Syndicate, again, bringing that up a lot, the way that Evie and Jacob play is very similar. Like on the fundamental level, they try to say that Evie's the stealthier of the two, Jacob likes to he's a brawler and stuff. But fundamentally, you could play the game and not really notice the difference between them. I like the level of thought here that they've thought we're going to have two divergent gameplay perspectives that we're going to show off here, because that also helps replayability, helps you recontextualize the world that you walk through.
Yeah, the thing I was going to say was that they've kind of struggled with Assassin's Creed's identity. I would argue all the way back to AC2 when they started having way more action-based set pieces. There's that whole bit when Ezio is riding the carriages.
Oh, the Da Vinci war weapons and everything.
Yeah, things like that. And it's like, even then they started deviating from it being just a pure stealth experience. But obviously the likes of AC Odyssey and then Valhalla's almost entirely melee-based. The idea of a Viking having an assassin's blade was always so stupid. And so I feel like they experimented with that a lot. Valhalla was the highest selling one, but the least like an Assassin's Creed game. And then now it's like, well, why don't we just have two protagonists that let you have each of that flavor and go between the two, and then maybe one side complements the other.
I don't know what you would think about this, but for me, even the early Assassin's Creed games, they were more stealth focused, but I almost never even thought of them as a stealth game, because their mechanical priorities were
open combat encounters.
It was to me, it was more about the chase or the social stealth, but not stealth as I would describe like a Splinter Cell game. You know what I mean? It was about kind of blending in and doing an assassination, then getting out. And it was kind of that, you know, cat and mouse game of, okay, I'm going to blend in here, I'm going to sit down on this bench, and then I'm going to make an escape and jump in a bale of hay. So I like this time around that we are incorporating like prone, and we're incorporating the ideas of Splinter Cell, where you have to take out lights or hide bodies. It's kind of basic stuff, but it's stuff that Assassin's Creed has never really had.
Stuff
in this
that
type
the genre
of stealth.
has disappeared for like completely gone for the last 20 years.
It's a genre that's been hiding the tall grass for like 10 years.
Yeah,
like it's I mean the thing is, like in the gameplay trailer for Shadows, that bit when they show now we're up against the corner of a wall, she's looking around, she's doing a distraction. It's like we've done that a million times over. But I'm glad they have the additional things like the seasonal stuff and whatever. But I hope that this kind of grounds Assassin's Creed again. Like Mirage was such a reminder of that old school stealth stuff, but just the reality of it being glorified DLC meant that they couldn't do much else with it. Whereas this is like the actual step forward for the series. I don't know if they keep the stealth and melee stuff, and every one going forward will have one of each. But I don't know. I like the fact that they're splitting it though.
I feel almost sacrilegious to say this, because I know you two are quite hype on the stealth, and I totally understand why. I do just want to cleave heads off. I do. And when I was looking at some of the animations with that big sort of mace-like
Club
weapon,
thing.
the big club with the kind of like the spikes or the ribbed edges, and he's just driving it into like people's stomachs, and he's stamping on.
You just want to sour on it, don't you?
I really do. Like
It's the choreography to it as well.
That's it. The choreography, the animations, the impact. It just, to me, all of that stuff coalesces so much better than it ever did in Valhalla, whose combat that I didn't mind, but it was only okay. This time around, it looks satisfying enough to sustain me. And if I'm going for a game in this setting, I love the like you can play as that shinobi character, you can go in a more stealthy way, but I also do want to whip out a sword and, you know, chop off a head as an execution, preferably without that filter that we talked about. But still, I like that. I like that they're going, like Ewan said, with those two divergent ways forward to hopefully. I think it will be a good precedent to set going forward, because it allows them to focus in more.
I hope that they coalesce more than they showed off there. The way that they structured it, it was like, you can either choose the Naue approach or the Yasuke approach. And I really, really do hope that there'll be some missions where you get to switch between them on the fly. Like, say you Yasuke creates a distraction where he goes to the front while Naue kind of does the stealthy option. Because that to me would be more interesting than just you can do it the loud way or you can do it the stealthy way. I think like you fuse those things together, it'd be really fun.
Because that is another thing that we've heard happens in games forever. It's always like, yeah, you can go in loud, you can go in guns blazing, or you can go in sneaking. It's like, but can we not interact those? I don't know.
That would be awesome. That feels like the next step of what they've got at the minute, because they've shown the character selection screen. So unless that would come up in a mission again, but like the idea of it being dynamic, where you you put Naue on a perch and then you switch back to Yasuke and run around and do the diversion, but then her AI takes over. So when you go back, she's like ready and waiting for the next kill or whatever it is. That will be a cool evolution of this. But I feel like this is a first step to them just re-grounding what Assassin's Creed even is after years of experimentation. Like even Origins, after like literally speaking to someone within Ubisoft, was a response to New Age Zelda, like trying to do even the way Origins is structured, like the small place where you get used to all the abilities and then it gets bigger, same as Breath of the Wild. It felt like they were chasing The Witcher, chasing Zelda, and it's always worth reminding any particular franchise, like there's a reason you're on the map in the first place, and it wasn't because you were chasing trends.
Yeah.
So I hope that they just find a way to make it feel like Assassin's Creed again, not to IGN it, but I still would like something that is a dedicated stealth experience.
The question is, right?
Yes.
We're all old. We were there playing Assassin's Creed 1 when it came out.
Hell yeah, we were.
Assassin's Creed obviously has always been hugely successful. Right from that initial game, it has the same or equivalent mainstream appeal, or at least recognition as something like a Call of Duty or a FIFA. To many people, an Assassin's Creed game is the one or two games they buy every other year or whatever. I wonder if the question of what is Assassin's Creed's identity, has that changed over the years? Because Assassin's Creed Valhalla was the first game in the series to reach $1 billion. Odyssey sold incredibly well, if I recall, more than any other Assassin's Creed to that point. Like the sales have been going up and up and up. So is there a generation of gamers now who are maybe the target audience where the modern Assassin's Creed gameplay style, that is their identity? I don't know.
I saw, just to quickly throw it in, I saw Assassin's Creed Mirage did sell well, but I just Googled it. It sold 50% less than Valhalla.
Yeah.
But apparently still did sell well comparatively.
This is the
overall.
interesting thing, right? Because like Assassin's Creed it's the history's playground game, and every person has their own kind of like history that they're most dialed into and fascinated by. And Vikings are a big part of the zeitgeist over the last 10 years between, Thor in the MCU, you got that Norse mythology aspect, you had the Vikings TV show, you've got people who are weirdly, massively, and kind of sometimes scarily into like Nordic culture and stuff like that, going back to the old days. And then you have like, so it makes sense that that Valhalla performed as well as it did, because
the Vikings TV show is fine.
Exactly, like everyone is kind of really into that space. I'm curious whether or not Assassin's Creed's best move going forward is that obviously people want an open world, they want combat, they want to inhabit these powerful like historical warriors or whatever. I'm curious whether or not they have to take more of a, I think this probably works better, because if you look at the older Assassin's Creed games, it was very much a case of like, well, Assassin's Creed 2, we're doing the exact same gameplay as 1, but we're in the Renaissance. We're not really going to change much in the stealth way.
Yeah.
You get to something like Assassin's Creed 3 and Assassin's Creed Black Flag, and they begin to think, okay, how can we really lean into the unique historical kind of context in terms of gameplay, which is where you get the sailing and stuff from. For this, I'm glad that they're moving back into this. And on the identity front in particular, the one thing that I really hope that when they're looking at each of these things, I think it's a great thing to do where you're like, okay, we're going to have a shinobi, we're going to have a samurai, we're going to really lean into what makes, if we're going to make a game set in feudal Japan, we're going to really make sure that we're not just going to put an assassin's hood on there and then you just kind of go everywhere. I just really hope that like, if you're going forward, is the RPG aspect, like, is that what because they showed the leveling stuff here, and I'm kind of like, Is this what it is now?
Just that thing about the leveling stuff is like they've tried across the last few installments to do leveled hidden blade kills, and then that idea that an enemy, even though the animation plays out the same, and you stab them in the neck, they just go, nah, you're not enough of a level. In this one, they'll just deny you outright if you're not the right level for it. So there is still a bit of that in there where you need to level up to take out a certain person.
A lot of that, perhaps paradoxically, because RPG systems are supposed to make you feel like you're playing a role and make the world feel more alive. But those systems, especially in Odyssey, just made it feel so artificial and arcadey to me, where you were just getting to a camp and you could see the levels above the heads of the enemies, and it's like, oh, all right, I guess I'll go somewhere else because my hidden blade's not going to work. I need to get better armor. And I don't hate having a leveling system in Assassin's Creed, but I prefer to be less about that and kind of more about combos and skills and
unlocking
stuff.
Weapons and
unlocking weapons, using like the environment, using kind of just your brain to get through stealthily, so you're not getting to the final guy that you're supposed to assassinate, and then your blade doesn't work, like I've just said. And hopefully they kind of integrate those RPG systems a little bit more. I wonder, though, if they keep the RPG systems as they are, because it's kind of a good way to sell microtransactions.
Well, that's the weird unspoken bit of this, is that like over the last few installments you've seen, I mean, it goes all the way back to AC Unity when they started putting the Helix credits and stuff in, but like all the microtransactions in it became Helix credits. But they've, like, for the most part, compared to like the Foam Stars £45 microtransactions or whatever different pay to win examples you can think of, I don't feel like Assassin's Creed has been one of the worst examples of that. They're in there if people want them. It doesn't excuse the reality of them existing, even though I do think there obviously is a reality where the devs need to get paid long term. Still, the way that they're put in Assassin's Creed is that there's usually a merchant who'll sell you premium stuff, but you can completely ignore them if you want, or you hit the pause button, hit the D-pad to get into the microtransaction menu, and then you can buy that premium currency. I didn't even know it was in there for the hours and hours of Valhalla, and I'm glad that they don't push it on you. I know that as the games went on, there are people have reported pop-up screens and things in later versions of games to remind people that the premium stuff is in there, but I do like that it's ignorable, and I will thoroughly be ignoring it in this.
That's
if it is in there.
100%. It is ignorable. I will give it that. Even in Valhalla, which kind of try to push you down that route in ways to be like, oh, here's a cool bit of gear for you. There was so much gear in that game. You just did not have to, what's the word I'm looking for?
Engage.
Or engage with it at all. I bristle a little bit, and I know this isn't the argument you were making, but you mentioned it about like they need to get paid. I only bristle because Valhalla made $1 billion, and if a company can't pay their devs with $1 billion haul for one game, I feel like you need to take a look at your books, brother.
Yeah, it's definitely the excuse given when games are rammed full of well, we're just doing it for the betterment of the teams, and it's like, well, if they were paid better anyway, you wouldn't need to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I guess I only worry about the microtransactions in this one in particular compared to Valhalla because it's the first one tied to their live service system, Assassin's Creed Infinity, so I don't want them to try to push their luck with it and make it more imposed than it has been previously, because otherwise it is totally ignorable, and you can just be like, nah.
I think you say it's ignorable, but it's kind of like on a grind-based aspect. It informs the level design, doesn't it? As well,
true.
and the way not the level design, but the way that you level up and engage the world. I think for me, it will be make or break if I'm out in the world as Nawe and I can't just stab a guy. I feel like if we're empowering people to be these warriors, I agree with you. Like the arcadiness of it just isn't conducive to making an historically immersive sim. Can you imagine going around in Ghost of Tsushima and then you get around to one Mongol warlord and you can't stab him because you're not leveled enough?
You can, but the guy just shrugs it off.
That to me, that's not what Assassin's Creed ever was or should be. Regardless of criticisms over how easy the early games were, I feel like there are ways to increase difficulty that don't feel artificial, which is where Star Wars Outlaws looks like it's kind of looking at it from a better angle.
I think we'll pivot to Outlaws in a bit. I think that's totally worth diving into a bit. The whole AC Infinity, their live service. Apparently now it's called the Animus Hub. It's going to be this like.
Oh, that's much lamer.
I know, right?
Animus Hub.
It's the Animus Hub. But they want to have this interconnected launcher essentially that would then plug. You would then plug different games into, kind of like what Call of Duty HQ is, or whatever. And AC Shadows is the first one of that. However, I remember me and you did a news on this, that all their monetary plans leaked for how they want to do various battle passes and character passes and things like that as an overarching series of goals to then have across the different campaigns that are plugged into the Animus Hub. So I think that will be where the aggressive monetization comes in.
That's it.
It just then depends what you link to that in terms of some sort of cool bit of kit or whatever.
Absolutely. I don't want to scaremonger too much because we don't have the details, but we've seen single player battle passes implemented before, and it's hard not to feel like they are getting the best looking even content behind this battle pass and paying a little bit more to get on that grind. And I do think that's you can say you can ignore it, but I think that's a shame for a game series like Assassin's Creed, where even back in the old days, changing your assassin's look was a big part of how you expressed yourself in the game, and especially when you have two characters like this, where you just want to look cool if you're assassinating people, and Ubisoft knows that and will try to monetize it. But I'll have to wait to see how they go with it.
I just wanted to throw in, because I am an absolute lunatic who at the minute has pre-ordered the Collector's Edition under the proviso that I can cancel up to a week before launch. So give me more gameplay and we'll see. I just wanted to be excited for something. But I remember looking at what you get for that, and it is a season pass. It is like the bonus quests and different points and premium currencies and stuff. So depending on how that stuff shakes out, they would would love to have some overarching progression that they can get over with the fans and then plug stories into it and have a fan base that is happy paying for the new character pass or whatever.
So it's like I'm actually pro the idea of having open world games and then building and plugging in things into those games. Like,
Yes.
I think like it's kind of, just to talk about Marvel's Spider-Man, I feel like it's kind of mad that Insomniac hasn't done like, we'll do a Daredevil DLC where we'll just throw Daredevil into this open world with some certain missions or whatever. We're just throwing in different things because I feel like we're not making as efficient use of these massively detailed spaces as we otherwise should be.
No.
And I feel like given that the boundaries in terms of, you know, graphical fidelity and like detail, they're not as big a leaps as they used to.
Yeah.
I'm actually not as like, if they were to do like a DLC for Assassin's Creed Shadows where it's like, we're going to bring in this new character and it's DLC, but it's the exact same open world, I'm fine with that. Like, kind of a bit of it was the case with the AC Freedom Car. Obviously they added Haiti as a map to explore as well, but it's still fundamentally like, I'm not as against that as I otherwise would maybe be. I don't know.